All right, welcome everyone to the Interneighborhood Cooperation Transportation Committee for May 12th, 2022. We have a good lineup for this spring meeting. We've got 4 speakers tonight. Each will be about half an hour, starting with the Denver Deserves Sidewalks Ballot Initiative, then going to 2 RTD topics, System-Wide Fare Study and Equity Analysis, and RTD Rail Service Planning. By request, we had some questions about rail operations, and one of the things we like to do is connect residents and neighborhood folks directly with the people who do the work. So we're lucky to meet Tegan tonight. And we'll end with a state legislative update from Piep Heuven. The session just ended yesterday, so we'll get all the fresh off the press news on things touching on mobility. So we'll start tonight with Jill Locantore, the executive director of the Denver Streets Partnership and the Denver Deserves Sidewalk Ballot Initiative. Let me just give a little intro to this to say that this is something INC has been pushing for 16 years officially. INC, before the Transportation Committee existed, had only the Zoning and Planning Committee for these topics, and that committee recommended to the delegation. The delegation approved a sidewalk position statement that has now been rolled into, in 2015, the INC transportation platform, and it includes a call for pretty much exactly what this ballot initiative is calling for. It took a lot of volunteers and advocates and nonprofits led by the Denver Streets Partnership to bring this to fruition. And now we're going to hear about the race to get it on the ballot and what's next. I will stop sharing and turn it over to Jill.
Thank you, Joel. We definitely appreciate the long history of advocacy that INC has done on the issue of sidewalks, and have been grateful to build on that foundation. If you've been following along, you know, as Walk Denver and then the Denver Streets Partnership, we've been talking about sidewalks for at least 7 years now. And we feel like the time has come to stop talking and put the decision directly to the voters if they want to actually do something substantial about our sidewalk program. So I'm going to share my screen. As Joel mentioned, this is an initiative we are hoping to get on the ballot in November of 2022. We are currently in the signature gathering phase, and if we collect 9,184 valid signatures from registered Denver voters, we will in fact be on the November 2022 ballot. So the proposal is pretty basic. It would fund the construction and repair of sidewalks citywide, so that everyone can get around our city more freely and safely. And ultimately, this would be shifting away from the decades-long practice of putting all of the responsibility for building and repairing sidewalks on adjacent private property owners, and actually publicly fund sidewalks, just like we fund streets and storm sewers and all kinds of basic infrastructure, which we believe would make our city more fair and equitable and safe for everybody. As many of you likely are well aware, currently in Denver, we have 40% of our streets that have no sidewalk at all, or a sidewalk that's too skinny to meet ADA standards, which makes it really difficult for everybody to get around, but in particular, people with disabilities, older adults, parents with children, and folks who are unable to drive for whatever reason because they can't afford a car, or they choose not to drive. It makes it particularly difficult to get around. And we know that low-income neighborhoods are the most likely to have unsafe, poorly maintained sidewalks. And these policies that put the full cost of building the sidewalk in the first place or repairing it on the adjacent property owner can be a huge financial burden, again, particularly for low-income households, where it can cost thousands of dollars to implement those repairs. So the proposed ballot initiative would remove the responsibility for repairs from adjacent property owners and place this squarely on the city. It would fund both the construction and repair of sidewalks citywide through what we believe is a modest annual fee that would be charged to property owners. And this would enable the construction of a complete sidewalk network that serves every single neighborhood in Denver within 9 years, compared to the current funding level, which would take about 400 years to build all those missing and substandard sidewalks. Once the network is completely built out, it would provide a sustained funding source in perpetuity to cover the cost of sidewalk repairs, with the assumption that every sidewalk in Denver would need to be replaced about every 75 years to keep it in good condition. I'm sure you're all familiar with the benefits of walkability, but just to highlight a few here: providing safe routes to school. I know a lot of parents who would like to let their kids walk to their neighborhood school, but don't feel it's safe because of a lack of sidewalks in their neighborhood. And not having sidewalks contributes to our traffic safety problems more generally. We know that people walking are 30 times more likely to die in a crash compared to people in a car. And sidewalks are the most basic infrastructure that we need in order to make walking safe. Walking is also essential to provide access to transit. Every transit rider is a pedestrian at some point in their trip, but we know many of the bus stops in our city are just a stick in the mud with no sidewalk that makes it accessible or inviting or dignified to get to and from that transit stop. And we also know that driving is one of the biggest contributors to air pollution and greenhouse gases in our region. And we know that we can't replace every single trip with walking, but a huge proportion of trips are a mile or less, which is totally doable by walking. But again, I hear from people like they would like to be able to walk to their neighborhood coffee shop or their park, but they don't feel safe doing so. And so they're choosing to drive for those short trips, and it's contributing to our air quality problems. So I'm sure your ears perked up when I said there would be a modest property fee, and you're very curious what that would look like. So the fee would be based on the linear frontage of the property. So basically how wide the lot is and the type of street that the property is located on. So the Blueprint Denver plan that City Council updated in 2019 classified all of the streets in the city according to both how much volume of traffic or people they anticipate going down that street, but also what are the adjacent land uses? Is it a residential street? Is it a busy mixed use area? Is it a downtown street? And then Denver's complete street design guidelines that were also recently adopted identify what is the preferred sidewalk width for each of those street types. You know, in downtown Denver, we anticipate there's going to be a lot of people walking and pedestrians. So the preferred sidewalk width down there is 12 feet, but on a quiet residential street, you know, walking is important, but we don't expect huge volumes of traffic, pedestrian traffic. So the preferred sidewalk width is 6 feet. So by combining the linear frontage of the property and the street type that the property is on, we're trying to tie the fee as directly as possible to the square feet of concrete that would be required to build the desired or preferred sidewalk on that street. So the most common case would be a single family home on a local street. In Denver, a typical single family lot is about 50 feet wide. And on a local street, the fee would be $2.15 per linear foot, which over the course of the year would be $107 or about $9 per month, which is less than a Netflix subscription. We also really wanted to be thoughtful about equitable distribution of the costs and not putting an undue burden on lower income households, and also parts of our city that have historically received less investment in public infrastructure, often in association with our history of redlining. And when we do make improvements in those parts of the city, there are risks of displacement as a result of that. So we consulted with Denver's Department of Economic Development and Opportunity and decided on the best way to do this equitable distribution of costs was to provide a 20% discount on the fee for any property that's located within one of the neighborhoods that the city has designated as a NEST neighborhood, which stands for Neighborhood Equity and Stabilization. These are neighborhoods that have lower income households and that have been identified as being at risk of gentrification and displacement. And you can see the list here of the neighborhoods that currently have that designation. The city does review these designations and in fact will be updating them, I think in the next year or so. So with this 20% discount, if we again look at that typical use case where it's a single family home on a local street, 50-foot property frontage, that the fee would be discounted to $86 a year or about $7 a month. The revenue that's generated by this fee could really only be used for sidewalks. There's lots of other things that our city needs that we want to see funded, from street trees to bus stop amenities to pedestrian scale lighting. But we wanted this program to be focused specifically on sidewalks. So the fee is limited to sidewalk construction where the sidewalk's missing, sidewalk upgrades where it's too skinny to meet current standards, and keeping those sidewalks in a good state of repair. And also we wanted to make sure we were covering the cost to administer the program, because we know it takes staffing and resources to oversee the program and to deal with complications that might come up and have some funding for that purpose. It does not include, as I mentioned, landscaping like street trees or street furniture, except as required, incidental to the construction or widening of a sidewalk. If we need to deal with changing some landscaping in order to build the sidewalk, then that can be part of the cost. Importantly, it also does not include snow removal as an allowable cost. That is also a very important issue that needs to be dealt with, but we feel like a different policy would be best to address that issue. And then finally, the program would be managed by the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and we wanted to make sure that there was public accountability built into the program. So the ordinance would require DOTI to present a comprehensive plan for how they're going to manage this sidewalk program to the DOTI Advisory Board, which is made up of citizens that have been appointed by the mayor and city council members. And also DOTI would have to report annually to this advisory board on how the program is going, what has been accomplished, what is the outlook going forward. It also directs DOTI to use the existing plans that have already been developed to prioritize the construction and upgrade and repair of sidewalks, focusing on our high injury network, the most dangerous streets where most of the traffic fatalities happen, major transit corridors where we know there's a high pedestrian demand, and streets connecting to other high priority pedestrian destinations, places like schools and parks and grocery stores. And I'm sure some of you in the audience also are huge fans of our beautiful historic flagstone sidewalks. And so we wanted to include some provisions for re-leveling and resetting those existing flagstone sidewalks where it is possible to do so, so we can keep those intact sidewalks in place. So we would love to have your support as individuals or as organizations, each of your RNOs, as well as INC overall. The number one thing you can do is sign the petition. If you go to denversidewalks.com, you can find location and events where we'll have people out with petitions that you can sign. We would also love to have you volunteer to go out and collect petition signatures in your neighborhood. And you can also donate to the campaign, which will help cover the cost of the signature gathering effort and make sure that we do get the number of signatures that we need in order to meet that goal and that deadline. And then finally, you can just sign on the website as endorsing the campaign, either as an individual or an organization. That becomes especially important if and when we do qualify for the ballot and we shift to a vote yes on the ballot initiative later this year. So I will pause there, stop sharing my screen, and see if there are any questions. I see there's a bunch in the chat that I've not been following along.
Yeah, Bruce has a question about corner lots.
Yes, so if you are a corner lot, I live at a corner lot right here, where you have sidewalk on two sides of your house, the fee would be based on both of those frontages. So just like you have to shovel twice as much snow as the homeowner of that corner lot, the fee would be a little higher for those corner lots as well.
And so today you're responsible for, if your sidewalk is broken or has issues, you'd have to repair both of those. We're transferring that responsibility to the city and paying a fee for the city to just simply take care of it.
Exactly. So, again, using that use case of a single family home, if you had 50 feet on both sides, then your annual fee would be $200, but that's still far less than if you actually had to repair those sidewalks, which could be $10,000 or more.
Great. Continuing on the fee discussion, there's a number of questions that Greg has regarding fees. Greg, do you want to tee up your questions?
So first of all, how were the fees determined?
So we did extensive financial modeling using data from both the city of Denver and CDOT on what the status of the existing sidewalk network is, how many miles there are of missing sidewalks, how many miles there are of substandard sidewalks. We have less good data on how many sidewalks are in serious disrepair, but was able to make an estimate there. And then data on how much it would cost to build the preferred sidewalk width on every single street in Denver. And therefore, what is the total cost? Then we tried to set the fee so that it would be a reasonable fee and not unduly burdensome, but would actually allow for the build out of the network in a timely manner, where we landed at 9 years for completing that build out.
So how much would this fee raise annually?
So it would raise an estimated about $41 million per year. The city could then bond against that as a sustained revenue source without having to go back to the voters to ask for permission. That would allow them to raise about $850 million in upfront capital, which is what would allow for that build out of the complete network within 9 years. And then going forward, that $41 million per year would pay for the ongoing repairs of the sidewalk.
Third question is, how soon would the program be implemented? If Dottie is implementing this, I'm not real convinced that they could begin this in a timely manner.
Yes, so the ordinance does stipulate that goal of building out the network within 9 years. That does assume that it would require a couple of years to ramp up and get the program going. And we're also fairly confident that with a program of this enterprise scale, an $850 million project, that would attract some high quality national construction firms that would be willing to come to the table and partner with Dottie to actually get this work done.
One final question. You mentioned that the preferred width for sidewalks in neighborhood areas, I think, was 6 feet.
Correct.
And they are not that wide now. So would you be reconstructing all of these sidewalks?
So the fee was based on that preferred width, but we did want to give Dottie flexibility to do what's actually reasonable in any given context. It may be that an existing sidewalk is 5 feet wide and widening it to 6 feet would be incredibly disruptive in terms of having to deal with street trees or underground utilities. And so we wouldn't want to dictate that in those instances, Dottie would have to strictly adhere to the guidelines, but it does encourage Dottie to refer to the guidelines in building out the network, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
So the likely outcome there, Jill, would be neighborhoods that have a 1.5 foot attached to the gutter kind of thing would likely be reconstructed at some point in the project, but neighborhoods with intact 5 foot sidewalk would probably not until those were really needing to be replaced from a conditions perspective.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's see. Bruce has a question about Dottie's capacity. Bruce? If you're able to unmute, feel free.
Yeah. I've bounced this off a couple of council people, and one says it's totally unfeasible. Another says that Dottie simply doesn't have the capability of handling more than about $10 to $15 million a year for these projects. Plus, the concrete contractors don't exist for that level of work.
So that $10 to $15 million per year is based on Dottie's current budget and contracting that they do. This would be a significant new funding source and enterprise scale program. As I mentioned, it could be bonded against to generate $850 million in upfront capital, which we are pretty confident would attract a different scale of contractor to the table who would be very interested in working with Denver on a project of this scale, and could enable them to do something like build their own concrete plant. For example, Denver has its own asphalt plant because it's spending about $50 million a year on repaving streets throughout the entire city. So if we scale up our sidewalk program to a similar enterprise, it'll makes this type of project way more doable than trying to build 2 to 3 million worth of sidewalks each year at a time.
Jill, the ordinance that's proposed does allow for kind of the project management, the overhead to be funded from this.
Exactly.
So it's dedicated to sidewalks, but that includes the management of the project.
Yes, we assume the city would have to hire new staff to manage this, and that is built into the understood cost.
Great. Everyone, please propose additional questions in the chat. I'll just go a couple different places. There was just in recent years an audit by the Denver auditor about the existing way of managing sidewalks, including an attempt at a sidewalk repair program that didn't really catch hold. What are some of the key lessons from that are baked into this?
Yeah, part of it was the gross inefficiencies of putting the responsibility on the adjacent private property owner, and how that just really added a lot of administrative overhead and complication to the program. And that the pace of that program, because it was only doing one neighborhood at a time, was really contributing to inequities in the city, and not allowing equitable access to safe walking conditions in every neighborhood, because you could only participate in the program if you were in the one neighborhood where the city was currently proactively inspecting the sidewalks and working on sidewalk repairs.
Great. So the key task right now is getting signatures, and
Exactly.
early July is the deadline to get the signatures in.
Yes, July 11th is the deadline in order to qualify for this November's ballot.
Okay. I'm just keeping an eye out for additional questions. One question is, why isn't the city just doing this? I'm sure council members have thought about running with this. Couldn't imagine getting to enough votes to refer it or whatever. I myself had hopes that the mayor in his last year would go big and solve some of the fundamental infrastructure we've been asking for all these times. But how did that go, and why is now the right time?
You know, I think the mayor and the city council have a little bit of a challenge trying to do more than one thing at a time. And right now, for example, they're working on the pay-as-you-throw initiative that would make composting and recycling free and frequent. And instead of paying for composting, people would pay for trash. And they feel like they can't think about both that and sidewalks at the same time. And that's basically the response we've gotten year over year over year. It's like, well, this year we're focusing on bike lanes, or this year we're focusing on affordable housing, or this year we're focusing on the parks tax, and you just need to wait your turn, you sidewalk people. But as Joel mentioned, INC has been working on this and asking for this for 16 years. And we felt like, you know, why are we continuing to wait? Let's put this directly to the voters. Our sense is that it's widespread belief that sidewalks should be publicly funded, and that this is essential basic infrastructure we should have in every neighborhood. So let's let the voters decide if it's time to prioritize sidewalks.
Thank you very much. I'm particularly excited because I watch all these plans. Blueprint Denver that I was involved in. Here at this committee, we've had a lot of presentations on the complete street design guidelines, Denver Moves pedestrian and trails. Each one of these had an element of pedestrian priority, of street classifications, of preferred design types, of prioritization. One of the big goals of the pedestrians and trails plans was, if you build out the network, where do you prioritize? And this takes all that work and doesn't redo it. It builds on it and says simply attach the funding and let's do it. And taking advantage of the new that we voted to have the Dottie created from the previous Public Works and to have the Dottie Advisory Committee. So it builds on all those things. So this is like a capstone project for Denver mobility. It's really fantastic.
And one last thing I would say is I am happy to give this presentation to any of your individual RNOs. I especially love it when I get to meet with you all in person, and then I'll bring my petition and clipboard so you can sign it. But that is the #1 way that you can help us, is by actually signing the physical paper petition. Signing online does not count, and or volunteering to gather signatures.
DenverSidewalks.com, you can find out about signing events. Once more, DenverSidewalks.com. There's one more question that came in, Lynn Brown. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there has been any kind of response from the city attorney's office, knowing that they're so concerned about liability.
Yeah, liability and fear of lawsuits has long been a concern or a reason that the city has given for why they can't be more proactive about sidewalks. But there was recently a state Supreme Court ruling that was very favorable to this initiative. The city of Boulder was sued because of a broken sidewalk that somebody tripped over and seriously injured themselves. And the facts of the case were pretty clear, that the sidewalk clearly presented a hazard. The city clearly knew that the sidewalk was a hazardous condition and had failed to repair the sidewalk within the same time frame they would like a pothole, within 48 hours. But the court recognized that the extent of the sidewalk problem is so widespread that it is totally unrealistic to expect the city to repair all the broken sidewalks within 48 hours, that they don't have that kind of magic wand. And there has to be some reasonable accommodation for the city to develop a plan and a funding source to repair and replace and build the sidewalks over time. So it really reinforced that governments do have a lot of immunity from these issues. And as long as they have a plan and a funding source, which is exactly what this ballot initiative would give them, it's very unlikely that a lawsuit would be unsuccessful. It's unclear what the remediation would be other than come up with a plan and a funding source to fix the sidewalks.
Yeah, that was incredibly well timed to have that we could point city attorneys to. And it's kind of perverse that the fear of if the city was responsible for fixing sidewalks, even if they had funding to do so, that they would be liable, resulted or contributed to years of ignoring the fact that sidewalks are a hazard and keep getting worse. So it's like all the stars are aligning at once here. Bruce had a final question about, has a presentation been given to the Sidewalk Working Group, which is an ad hoc, every now and again, working group of council?
Yeah, the City Council Sidewalk Working Group hasn't met for years. Basically, the last time they met was probably in 2017, before the city's current sidewalk repair program was launched. So there were no meetings of the City Council Sidewalk Working Group for us to present to, but we have been consulting with all of the city council members. We invited all of them to participate in sidewalk walking tours last year, with the hope that we would inspire them to finally lead on this issue. But when that leadership did not emerge, we shifted to the ballot initiative, and again have been meeting one-on-one with the council members to share the details and answer whatever questions they have.
And none of this is a surprise to them. The city attorney's office has reviewed the official filing and had ability to comment.
Yes, you before you can even start gathering petition signatures, you have to have review and comment from the city attorney's office and the city council legislative office. And we did make some refinements to the ordinance based on their feedback.
Great. Well, I encourage everybody to go to denversidewalks.com, find out where you can stop by and gather signatures. Oh, Michael Henry's raising his hand on video. Hello, Michael.
Joel, it sounds to me like it's timely for a motion that I hereby move that the INC Transportation Committee recommend to the INC delegation that INC should support the Denver Sidewalks Initiative and urge all of our member organizations to participate as loudly and strongly as they can for this important issue.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would second that emotion,
Is
that motion. Second that
is it-
emotion and that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. This is in order. In INC, committees are open to everybody. So everybody who lives in Denver can participate. And while a committee cannot make a position on behalf of INC, the committee can recommend, exactly as Michael did, that the INC delegation take such a position. So thank you very much. I will write that up if this gets votes in committee. If everyone's comfortable using the raise hand feature in Zoom, and again, this is open to everybody who's a Denver resident. There's no strict membership or needing to be a delegate. And I will count up how many raised hands we have in a moment. So this is those who are for the motion that Michael explained, and we're recording this, so I'll get the wording right after the fact. And so, again, anyone who's on who's a resident of Denver, please use the raise hand function, not the thumb function, because that goes away after a few seconds. Zoom has nicely added a new feature where I can see a count. I see 15 according to this count. Okay, if you would lower your hands. All right, and all those opposed to the motion, please use the raise hand feature. I'll just give it a moment for those opposed to this motion. This is a motion to recommend the INC delegation to support the Denver Deserves Sidewalks initiative, and then additional language that Michael had that I'll transcribe from the recording. Okay, I see no hands opposed to the motion, so I will write this up and transmit it with a recommendation from the committee shortly after this. This, by the way, this presentation will be recorded in the next couple of days. It'll be updated, the whole meeting, not just this portion, will be uploaded to YouTube on the Denver INC YouTube channel. So you can refer to this and share it. And of course, as Jill said, Denver Streets Partnership is willing to visit neighborhoods and talk about this and answer everybody's questions, as Jill is really, really excellent at answering every question from every direction. Thank you so much, Jill. Okay, we're now going to move on to the next item on the agenda. As we know, RTD has one of the highest fares, base fares in the country for using a bus or train. And that presents equity issues. But behind that, there are some real financial challenges. There have been some legislative challenges for how much RTD has to charge at the fare box relative to how much they bring in taxes. So to study this again, and it's a tricky problem, RTD has started the fare and pass study, and we have Chris Quinn here tonight to tell us about that. And as always with the INC Transportation Committee, we want to bring the people really doing the work to the neighbors, both those who are attending live in person and in recording, so we can understand and explore an issue at a deeper level than just simply responding to a survey, although I'm sure they'll want us to respond to surveys as well. Introducing Chris Quinn. Chris, I'm going to set you up to be able to share your screen, which I should have done a moment ago.
Yeah.
And feel free to start.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as Joel mentioned, my name is Chris Quinn. I am with the RTD Planning Department. And yes, again, we are embarking on another system-wide fare study and equity analysis. And let me know when I can share my screen and I'll pull up a presentation.
You are the co-host now, so you should have
Great. Okay.
all of that.
Let's see. Is it showing for everyone?
Looks great.
Good. Okay. Let's see. Let me just. Otherwise, doesn't seem to be advancing for me.
Chris, does the space bar work?
No, let me, why don't I stop sharing and I'll, oh, well, give me a moment. I'll try another method here. Let me try it not fully open and then see if I can expand it. Ah, okay.
Perfect.
I don't know why that worked. So just a real quick agenda overview. Let you know what we're doing with the study, how we define equity. Joel did mention equity and the challenges that we've had with our fares related to equity. Real quick, current fare structure, and then some of the feedback that we've received to date at the public meetings that we had last month, and then open it to question and answers. Real quick, I know you guys are relatively more informed bunch, but just real quick, one of the things I do want to emphasize that one of the points from this particular slide is the very first bullet or very first factoid there. RTD's service area is over 2,000 square miles. It is almost twice the size of the state of Rhode Island. Therein lies some of the challenges that we have. We, unlike most other metropolitan areas, RTD is essentially the sole operator of nearly all of the transit services, whether it's the light rail, the heavy rail, accessoride, local bus, regional bus. So as we start to, hone in on what fare structure should look like, this is one of the challenges that we've had historically that has contributed to the complexity of the fares that we do have. Why are we doing this again? Well, as Joel noted, we are, by national standards, we are one of the more expensive agencies. We've heard repeatedly from our customers when we're out in public that not only are the fares too high, but the fare boundaries, the fare structure itself is confusing. The past programs are confusing, who's eligible, who's not, as far as meeting requirements. So one of the things that we want to do is see if we can, take a little bit more of a customer-centric approach and really focus on equity as we move forward. And then the last bullet on there, one of the big things that we are going to have to do is explore the trade-offs associated with lowering fare, if we were to lower our fares. And as Joel noted, we used to have by state statute, we had a mandate that a certain percentage of our fares cover the cost of the service. So we refer to that as our fare box recovery ratio. It was roughly 30%, and it included a few other things besides fare. It included advertising and some of the federal grant revenue that we received. But House Bill 1186, which was, I think, signed into law not quite a year ago, that relieved us of those fare box requirements. So going into this study, we have a little bit more flexibility in the past in that we don't have to necessarily meet specific revenue targets. However, we will of course still have to balance, what the revenue coming in, how that relates to the service provided. One of the big things that we really want to also focus on as we move forward is making sure that whatever we come up with is equitable. Three guiding pieces, or kind of the three guiding goals that that's redundant. The three goals we have are equity, affordability, and simplicity. And I think pretty much they speak for themselves, but I will talk a little bit more about equity in just a moment. As far as the timeline, our goal is to have this wrapped up, going to the board for final approval about a year from now, so roughly the April timeframe. But kind of moving backwards to where we are now, spring of 2022. We have had a couple of public meetings, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the input that we received at those meetings towards the end of the presentation. This summer, we will be coming back to the public again. Our initial public meetings were really just, hey, What do you like? What don't you like? Just what are your thoughts on where things are right now? Summer, we want to start throwing out some real high level concepts or conceptual fair structural options. And then towards the fall timeframe, we will go out to the public yet again. And with that, have some serious alternatives for the public to weigh in on, with the public hearings to be in the spring timeframe. And then, as I said, we're coming back full circle to the board in roughly the April timeframe of next year. Our equity has always been important to RTD, but in particular with our new general manager, that is something she has really wants to be a core principle as we move forward. So I want to make sure that, a lot of this is obvious, but want to make sure that the system fairly distributes the benefits and adverse effects of transit without regard to race, color, national origin, or income status. And this is also codified in the Civil Rights Act, Title VI, as well as an executive order on environmental justice, which I think came out in 1992. The other thing that we really want this study to do is have it be a customer-centric approach. Recognizing as particular with, since the pandemic has hit, we really now know who our core riders are, whether they're transit dependent, low income, can't afford a car, whatever. The people who are riding now, those are the people we know really need transit the most. So with that in mind, we're working with a series of community partners, community-based organizations to help get the word out that we're doing this. Of our 2 public meetings, one of those was held solely in Spanish. And then we also have, as kind of a guidance to the study, we have 3 feedback panels, and I'll talk about those in the next slide here. One of those is what we're calling our equity feedback panel, and that includes Black, Indigenous people of color, those with limited English proficiency, immigrants, refugees, youth, LGBTQ, just trying to make sure that populations that traditionally in the past have not necessarily had the loudest voice at the table, make sure that they are heard. We also have a past program feedback panel that's comprised of major employers in the area, the colleges, universities, and some of the schools. And then we also have a jurisdictional feedback, and that is representatives from state and local governments, as well as the Denver Regional Council of Governments and transportation management organizations. But what we've done is we've set this up so we first go to the public with our first series of public meetings, then we go to the feedback panels to kind of show them what we've heard and get the feedback on that. So as I mentioned, we did have our first series of public meetings in April, and then we came back to the feedback panels just this last week to start getting the initial input from them. Now, as Joel mentioned, our fares are high, they are complicated. And if you look at this slide, I don't even like going over it because it's just a lot of pieces to it. As any of you who've used the system outside of, say, outside the city and county of Denver, you have to start thinking about which fare do I need? Am I crossing a fare zone boundary? We have 2 fare zones, one for the local, one for the regional. Actually, we have 3 fare zones. If you cross into this, again, this is where it starts getting complicated, trying to explain this in a very simplistic way. If you cross 2 fare zones, then you have a regional fare. Unless you go to the airport, then we have a hard boundary. If you go start or end a trip at the airport, then there's a regional fare for that. Bus routes, the regional routes, don't quite follow it this way. We have almost like this matrix that shows the fares you're supposed to pay for that. So needless to say, it's a very complicated system. Anecdotally, our not so new general manager, she came in about a little more than a year and a half ago. She said when she first got here, tried to buy a ticket. She is a 30-year veteran in the transit industry. She couldn't figure out what she was supposed to pay for her ticket. So how do we expect the general public to figure this out?
Yeah.
Also, we do have a lot of past programs, and they've been very successful, but one of the problems with them is just trying to determine, for the general public here again, trying to determine eligibility, which one would work best for me. Certain passes will do certain things, others won't. So it's something else that we're really want to focus in on as well to see if we may be able to streamline some of the ways the past programs work. Oh, and then let me just go back, because I know Joel did ask the question in the email correspondence that we had before this meeting, is how do our fares compare to other systems? Right now, for our local fare, we are one of the highest in the nation. Other properties are catching up to us, but in the past, we've always assumed that we would have a fare increase about every 3 years, and we're at about the 3-year mark now. We have built into our financial plan that we don't necessarily have to have a fare increase, and maybe even could have a fare decrease. So here again, I want to emphasize that unlike previous efforts, we don't have fare revenue targets that we need to meet in order to move forward. So a lot more flexibility than in the past. As I mentioned, we've had a public meeting, one in English, one in Spanish. The English meeting, we had about 35, 40 participants, which I don't know about other agencies, but we've been having a lot of trouble recently getting people to meetings. That we don't, we're calling it Zoom fatigue, if people are just, sick of logging into meetings. But we did have it set up as a Zoom webinar. And the themes that we did here are, for the most part, really no surprises, concerns about the complexity of all the different fare products, the discount levels, confusion on how to use the various passes. And then we also heard, and not surprisingly, with some of the external challenges we've had with accommodating the unhoused, security issues, and then of course equity. The question came up on, is there a better way to make fares more affordable for those who really need it, lower income people or people who are really reliant on transit. Some of the suggestions, you can see that on the right side of the slide, such as a single flat fare, that came up quite a bit. Discount rates, standardize them. Right now we have one for low income, one for seniors, one for youth. So needless to say, it creates a lot of confusion for, say, our bus operators when somebody goes on trying to figure out which fare they are supposed to pay. Then at the Spanish meeting, at the Spanish speaking meeting that we had the following week, a lot of similar themes came up, but one other kind of theme there, though, is really, there seemed to be a little bit more emphasis on the fact that there are a lot of people who just can't afford the fares as they are now, and the fact that while there is a great variety of passes, trying to figure out which one you need and where to obtain that pass can be fairly complicated. So I think, yeah. Oh, and one other input thing. We did have a survey that was online that closed last Friday. We're just now, we know that we got, I think it was about 2,600 responses. We are just now starting the synthesis on that. So we haven't combed through it enough to know what kind of trends to see, but really, really eager to see what comes out of that. And with that, well, actually, let me jump to this last comment or last page. One other thing, obviously, like any other study, we do have a website. Don't worry about the URL. If you just Google RTD fare study, it will take you to the page. We're in the process right now of scheduling our next public engagement meetings. We anticipate that those will be sometime late June. And on the website, we also have a comment form so you can provide feedback at any time. And obviously we'll have the most up-to-date information from the study on the web page as well. So with that, happy to try to respond to any questions, concerns, comments that anyone has.
Great. Well, we have a ringer here. We have someone from RTD. Tegan asked, will there be a potential for passes to be for the year versus for the month? For example, the disabled passes.
Yeah, certainly something we can look at. Now, I will say though, in the past, we did have an annual pass. And one of the things that we did find was that most people didn't have the money to front and pay for pass up front, but it's certainly, within the mix of things, it's certainly something that we can reopen, because we want to pretty much put out there that, I don't want to say everything's on the table, but most things are on the table at this point.
So both
I only
fares and
asked
passes.
one because I have, disabled family that hate going down to Blake Street every
Oh.
month to renew their pass.
Yeah,
And then my cousin who lives in Ruby Hill wants, he doesn't have the ability to get to downtown to renew his youth pass every month for school because Denver does the school bus on RTD.
yeah, and I don't want to go too far off the rails, but yeah, I have some strong opinions on that piece right now. So yeah.
Where we make people visit a certain site in order to get the discounts they're entitled to.
Yeah.
Sounds like an issue. Amy has a question. Amy?
Hi, if you guys could just watch my daughter climb through the kitchen trying to make mugs while I ask this question. I live near the Broadway station, and I've been doing a lot of research on the interchange project that's going on at Broadway and I-25. And in that research, I found that RTD did a study of the cars in the parking lot there, which is very expansive and it's free. And 60% of people using that parking lot are coming from outside of Denver. So I'm just curious, are you studying parking at all?
As part of this, we are not. That's kind of a part of a bigger discussion that we're having related to parking. And yeah, not to belabor the point, but you are correct. Pre-pandemic, we used to conduct an annual license plate survey. So we were able to get not names, but the addresses in GIS format of where people were coming from. And yeah, there are some crazy distances that people are driving to get to the Broadway park and ride, which it's pretty surprising.
Amy, did you have a follow-on to that? Is it?
I mean, no,
Okay.
I just wanted to know if you're studying parking for this conversation.
For this particular study, no, but as part of the whole Reimagine RTD effort, which is kind of a concurrent effort that's going on, that is being taken into consideration. Yeah.
Okay, Greg has a question about metrics. Greg?
So you know how many passengers you have at $3 per fare for local trips. So how much would passenger ridership increase if you reduced the fare to $2 or to $1? Or conversely, if you raised it to $4, what sort of calculations are you using to estimate that income and
Yeah, that's
actual service?
Yeah, so as part of the analysis we will do when we start getting alternatives, we have a consultant on board to help us with this, because we certainly don't have the expertise to do that type of modeling. So we do have one of our consultants specializes in fare studies, fare modeling, and they will put all that input into the fare model to determine, what is the elasticity of the different pricing, what are the impacts based on what we charge. So it's coming. We don't know anything yet.
Okay, Greg, anything more?
No, thank you.
Okay. Bruce comments that he misses being able to buy discount ticket booklets. He was a fan of those. And John Rickey chimes in. John, do you want to share your comment? He was having some audio problems earlier. Okay, he says the audio is still difficult. He says, count me in as a supporter of flat fare. Once I'm on the network, the marginal cost is zero for RTD, so why charge more? If the goal is fewer drivers, cleaner air, safer streets, then simplicity is called for. And I think a vote for a flat fare.
Yeah.
I have a question about the bounds of what will be considered here. If there was a desire to make short trips reasonable in terms of their cost, right? I'm 10 blocks from downtown, but it's got to be raining pretty hard for me to pay $3 to go 10 blocks, right? That invites a level of complexity because then you're differentiating by how far people go in whatever way that's done. If that were to be explored or anything like it, is part of this study looking at sort of tap on, tap off payment, where the payment that's charged to your credit card or your stored value RTD card or your phone app is dependent on how far you went, and people don't have to pre-calculate that or prepay that, it just does it itself?
Yeah, that's a real good question. And by prefacing it with the real good question, it means I don't have the answer. We are in the process right now of, it'll be later this summer, I think August is the target, that we will be kind of converting from our smart cards to an account-based ticketing, so that you'll have a lot more flexibility with being able to load stored value onto your card and it'd be instantaneous, as opposed to now with our smart cards, which aren't very smart in that it's sometimes a couple of days before, if you've added value, before it actually shows up on the card. I am trying to remember, and this part's been very confusing to me, and we can get back to you on this, on whether or not the validators that we are installing on the vehicles would allow for tap off. I don't believe that they do or can, but I'm not sure on that. So
Yeah, I know they're not at all doors right now.
Yeah,
and that's a separate question from if they're capable. Again, I'm not advocating necessarily what their answer is, but just wanting to understand if it's within the realm of things that can be considered, that technology like that's used with other agencies can hide complexity when complexity is worth it to incentivize both people doing short trips and people doing long trips. But we don't want to have to stare at complicated fare charts.
Well, yeah, and one thing, and you bring up something I did neglect to mention, as part of the account-based ticketing, the technology though will allow us to fare cap, so that if, as an example, if you make, I'm making this up, 3 local rides per day, it would automatically just assume that you have the day pass and charge you for that, not for the 3 individual rides. So so they're at least there in it just kind of behind the scenes, as you said, some of the behind the scenes complexity is being taken out of the user face. So we're very happy that we'll be able to institute that now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jillian has a question that shows she's been watching the RTD news. Jillian?
Yeah, I heard a story on CPR this morning about what they had learned at past periods from free rider programs. And I was wondering what kind of information you might be hoping to gain during the periods of free rides to lower ozone.
Yeah, so I think it was just today, the legislature approved funding statewide for free fares for the August timeframe, peak ozone season. So we'll be working with the state to so that we can in fact implement no fares for August. And right now we have just started working, in fact, about like a week ago when it became pretty imminent that this was going to happen. We started working with the governor's energy office to determine, okay, what are the metrics we're going to want to start looking at? What are the things that we're going to need to track? The obvious ones are, what does it do to the change in ridership? What are the specific routes that benefit her? Just tracking all the basics on that. And then obviously also just trying to determine after it ends, have we attracted new riders that actually stay? So it's going to be a fascinating experiment that we'll see what comes out of it. Yeah. And I don't know if I answered your question on that or not.
Oh no, that was it. That was really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'll just kind of end with one again, trying to push the bounds of understanding what might be in scope here. Is there any possibility that this effort in communication with Reimagine RTD, which is coming up with the desired network. It's kind of rationalizing a network, optimizing for equity and ridership both. So running buses where they'll be used a lot and where they're needed the most. Is there any possibility that given RTD's financial constraints, the right balance is found with lower fares and somewhat less service, where service is directed to the more frequent major routes, but pared back so that RTD can both afford to run all that service and can afford a fare that more people will choose to pay? Is there any push-pull between these efforts like that?
Oh, big.
Okay.
And I see Tegan smiling. Yeah, well, one of the, I'll just put it out there. Yeah, one of the challenges that we have going back to just the sheer geographic size of the agency is the fact that, you know, we have the urban Denver interests, and then we also have the suburban interests. And one of the things that the pandemic has shown us is that our core ridership really, for the most part, and there are some big exceptions to this, but for the most part, central Denver routes, inner Denver routes are the routes that have performed the best, and the ones you would expect: Colfax, Broadway, Federal, out in Aurora, say the 121, which is on Peoria. Those are the routes that have done very well, while a lot of our suburban routes, especially the commuter regional routes, for obvious reasons with, you know, so many people teleworking now, have performed very poorly. But needless to say, the residents of those areas, you know, kind of are of the mindset of, well, one of the reasons they're performing so poorly is you've cut back our service so much that, you know, of course the ridership's going down, and you're just kind of, you know, you're creating the downward spiral. And, you know, that could be true, but I guess going back to your point of, it's awfully hard. It's a really difficult task to cut routes, any routes at any time, even to focus on those that are the most productive.
Well, I don't envy your task, but I'm glad you're taking it on, and hopefully the committees that already exist for Reimagine RTD can be a part of this discussion about, you know, targeting fares and the implications there. Because one of the things I've been impressed by with the Reimagine RTD committee or task force, whatever it's called, is there's a lot of elected leaders on there that if they can find consensus, then a lot of things might be possible that are the right things to do. So there's my optimism for the evening.
Appreciate it.
Chris, thank you so much for the presentation and letting us see behind the curtains to this work in progress.
Great, thank you. All right,
Thanks
have
so
a good
much.
night.
We'll stay with the RTD theme for our second topic. And this is a little different. Tegan Rice is joining us. She's a rail service planner and scheduler. And the reason why I reached out to Tegan was there were some questions that came in to me in preparation for this meeting about what's going on with service on rail. One of the topics was, you know, and this is not solely what we're going to talk about, but, you know, what happens with big events, you know, events at places where people are used to a late let out and everybody gets on the train, but the train isn't running. And so to give a perspective on, in general, what's happening with rail service, both now and where it's planned to go, I love to go right to the person who's working on it. And that's Tegan Rice. So Tegan, really glad you can join us. Now, I have to say, she didn't prepare a presentation. So this is a conversation, which means the obligation is on us to ask good questions.
I did throw a few things together, mostly just kind of a summary of what we have gone through with the whole rail service plan since we've gone through the pandemic. So when we had the pandemic, we were given this immediate task to minimize service, but make sure that we served everybody equitably. So for the rail line, that meant suspending the C line and the F line, because that matched the current Sunday schedules, which Sunday schedules pre-pandemic didn't run quite as late as normal. So then when they were quarantining downtown. Ridership on rail, especially late night after 10 p.m., ridership was down to the single digits for a train, which is really inefficient for even a 2-car train that can hold comfortably 140 people. So what we did is I was a little bit selfish for my maintenance of way people, and I cut the service to end at 10 p.m. to open a maintenance window because we were going to take advantage of the lower ridership and try and get a bunch of maintenance that needed to be done on the wires and the tracks in the middle of the night where it would be as little disruption to the customers as possible. However, then all of a sudden, COVID was starting to not become a big deal anymore. So ridership started to increase, and we saw the biggest increases on Fridays and Saturdays. Our weekday service was still pretty minimal. So with the May 21 service change, I did propose to extend the service ban to accommodate the events at like Ball Arena, Mile High. And still looking at ridership with the exception of events, the weekday and the Sunday service, those evening trips after 8 p.m. are less than 100 people per day. So it's kind of hard to equitably go to the board and feel responsible to say, hey, we need to add additional service for, you know, all weekdays, all Sundays, when really we only need service for these events. However, another thing that happened with our new general manager is in the past for event service, we were mandating operators to volunteer to work. So basically they were told to work on one of their days off, which was actually turned out to be a huge reason why many of our operators were leaving RTD, was because they didn't want to be forced to work one of their 2 days off, which I completely understand. So now any event service that we have is based on if we can get volunteers to actually run additional service. So right now, my big example is for Bronco service. Pre-pandemic, I used to schedule anywhere from 9 to 15 trains, depending on it being a Sunday or a weekday evening trip to do the additional service. For this last year, I scheduled 5 trains and I was lucky to get 2 volunteers to help with getting people to Broncos games and after. So that's kind of the situation we're in right now. And I'm open to any other questions in regard to rail service.
Okay, and did you say you had a couple visuals, or this is the main one?
Oh,
you focus on?
this is the main one. I just kind of put together a summary and a rail map to show some of the constraints that we have, because I know talking to you, we talked about the central corridor, which is where we pre-pandemic had 5 lines running through I-25 and Broadway through 10th and Osage on a 3-minute headway or train space 3 minutes apart, which is as tight as I can schedule a train through that corridor. So pre-pandemic, any type of service enhancement, increased frequency that I wanted to do was not optional.
Great. I'll ask people to propose questions. What have you always wanted to know about rail scheduling? And it is kind of this puzzle, right? I mean, all the rail schedulers I've ever known are kind of puzzle people. There was even a predecessor of yours who a model railroad fan and had a big model railroad set up in his basement. But he told me it was sort of meditative to think about the timing of when things happen and just let his mind relax and solve puzzles. I don't know if it's like that for you, but I think it's kind of fascinating. So outside of the rails, the schedules probably need to meet up with other things. Are there other like bus routes and major transfer points that kind of drive the schedules?
There are, for personally, because the trains are they're on a fixed guideway. It's not like as though I can detour them and have them pass each other on the tracks. The bus routes are generally scheduled to meet with the train. So when I want to propose a service change, I try to let people know if there are certain meets that might potentially change at other rail stations so that they can alter those to serve them. One meet that I was completely shocked about was people riding the G line and then transferring to the E line to get to Denver Tech Center for work. So that's a current meet that I'm trying to investigate how best to adjust, because I am just constrained on how many time slots I can schedule service, and just shifting the E line 3 minutes means I have to shift everything else 3 minutes so that I don't have trains crossing or getting into each other's way. Sorry, I got distracted because I popped up in the chat.
No, what? Yeah, there's some questions coming in. When you talk about trains getting each other's way, there's a few places in the RTD route where RTD rail system where it's a single track, and that's a big constraint, right?
Yeah, so most of our commuter rail is a lot of single track. There are a few sections that are double track to get around each other, or they'll be delayed, especially the N line, I feel like is the longest single track that we actually built. But like even for the A line, there's a significant amount of single tracking from 40th and Airport to DIA. The L line, once it leaves that central downtown loop, is single track from about 20th and Welton up to 30th and Downing. We have a lot of single track on the W line between Red Rocks and actually it's from Fed Center to Red Rocks, which includes that really big bridge that crosses over 6th Ave. It's actually really fun to ride that in the cab.
So not only do you have to figure out the schedules that get people where they need to go and meet up, but you also have these real hard constraints as to how frequently they can go in those single track areas.
Right, like the L line, I can't schedule it any more than 15 minutes. The W line, I can't schedule it any more frequent than 15 minutes from Fed Center to Jeffco, for example. The N line, due to that really long bridge that everybody brags about that crosses over Sunco or Sunco, I can't even think of the name of it right now. That bridge is a huge constraint to the timing. So even though in simulations, originally the consultants thought we could make 20-minute headways work, with the way that the system is working in real life, 30 minutes is about as good as it's going to get, I'm afraid.
So when transit folks talk about urban transit, frequency is a real driving factor. The more frequently something comes, the more you can go when you want to go, rather than having to schedule your life around it. A lot of both the commuter rail and the light rail kind of behave like commuter services in the sense that it's not going to be that frequent. Now, they are generally all day, whereas some commuter services are, morning and evening, but there's sort of a push and pull between the central Denver frequent kind of demands and the constraints built into the system for frequency for the longer runs. We have a couple questions here. First, John Ricky, I don't know if you're still having audio problems. Do you want to ask about staffing? Okay, John's not coming off mute. I'll read his question. Why doesn't RTD just hire people specifically for split shifts to work the events? And we know the event schedules, they're published. So simply hiring people, this is a thing RTD is wrestling with in general.
It is something we're wrestling with. So for our light rail operators, those operators have to go through 8 weeks of training. Sometimes it's 10. And so really you don't want to schedule somebody just to run those special events, even though those are cake pieces, because you basically run 1 or 2 trips before the event, sit for a few hours, and then you get to do the return trip. But we just don't have that much event service throughout the year to even warrant assigning just voted split shifts for events. It's much more efficient to just use regular in-service operators or operators who want to get a little bit of extra overtime to do the events.
Okay. And we know both on bus and rail operators is a big shortage for RTD.
Yeah,
Um,
for light rail right now, the last time I saw, we were short 30 operators. So trying to get 30 operators hired, and then we can only do classes of 8 to 16 if they decide to do a day class and a night class. So it would still be almost 3 or 4 months if we could hire enough people to actually reach full staff.
Bruce has a question about schedules. Bruce. I think Bruce may have stepped away. He has a question about when now is the last E, F, and H train from Union Station, leaving from Union Station.
So on Friday and Saturday, the service runs until 2 a.m. the next day. However, still on Monday through Thursday and on Sundays, the last trains usually are leaving Union Station around 10:30 p.m. if I could squeak in an extra trip without getting into trouble, because any service change we do has to be equitable throughout the entire system. So if I were to, for example, add additional service to the E and the W line to extend the evening service for Monday through Thursday and the Sunday schedules, I would also have to add service to the D line and the R line, which is very expensive. It means a whole lot more operators than just the 6 that I would need for the E and the W line.
Lauren has a question about cancellations and how they work. Lauren?
Yeah, so I mean, my question is obviously more related to, subtraction versus addition, but I was kind of a consistent rider of RTD in like 2019 period, and I imagine it's changed since COVID, but when there is a situation where drivers call out or there's a shortage because of the current operator shortage, I guess in regards to that equity lens, what else beyond that is taken into consideration for cancellation of lines, I guess?
So when I added the evening service to Friday and Saturday, we went back into the trend of drop trips on rail. And the way that the drop trips work, so I have a rail schedule, I connect the trips, that's a train, and then I have to break those little trains up into workable pieces for the operators to vote. So when the operators can't come into work and there's not enough extra board operators, then that results in the drop trips, which I experienced too when I was commuting to and from in 2019, which was really frustrating because the bus service to get to my house is even less frequent than the rail. So we're still doing the service alerts. They have enhanced the system, so now you can get it via text message, which I think is a lot more helpful because I don't check my email for service alerts to make sure I got a trip home at the end of the night. And I'm hoping with the new CBA contract that just finalized this last week, I think, and the $4,000 hiring bonus, I'm hoping that that higher pay will incentivize more people to come work for RTD so that maybe we can stop at least dropping service before I start to consider adding more service.
Absolutely. Thank you for your answer.
Sure.
Both John and Rob have a question about the future as we rebuild service and ridership. Rob, do you want to tee up the question?
Sure. I think John asked about changing number of tracks on the bridge, but mine was just more general. And what are the possibilities for getting different lines double tracked?
Lots and lots of funding. Unfortunately, yeah, there's several areas that would need to be double tracked. For example, the long bridge that they built on the inline just recently, I think they would have to rebuild that bridge to make it wide enough to accommodate a double track. some areas we can't make them double track. For example, the L line, which is in central downtown. We don't, unless Denver decides to give up the rest of Welton Street to us for tracks, it's just not a potential option to have a double track there. For the W line, the single track's not as much of a constraint because of the, it is double track at the stations. So as long as I make sure I schedule meets, it's a little bit easier to make the service work. I'm trying to think of my other single track sections. And I'm thinking even on the B line and the G line, it would require people giving us more space, giving us the right of way so that we could then get the funding to add additional tracks, which is not really everybody's priority with the Northwest Rail project that the governor keeps pushing as RTD's priority for the next rail improvement.
If we had service and ridership at the level that we had right before the pandemic, and the pandemic didn't happen and we were continuing to grow, what would be your number one wish list for removing a constraint, a physical constraint, a track constraint that you're like, oh boy, if this continues, we're going to hit a wall. If I had one thing I could just get for asking, what would it be?
I would like 4 tracks for that central corridor between I-25 and Broadway and what we call the CPV junction when the trains separate to either go to central downtown or Union Station. That would be wonderful. Another awesome thing would be if I could get the little Y track built back in that used to connect the Colfax and Auraria station to the Auraria West station, because honestly, the way the L line works right now, it gets in its own, everybody else's way half the time. So it would be nice to maybe connect that to Union Station. But that's my own opinion. Those are just some of my ideas.
Great, great. I know there's a bunch of people pulling for you, pulling for the system and for your sanity on the central area with the Burnham Yard acquisition. There's a big rail yard just west of the Baker neighborhood that's no longer used and is now owned by a division of CDOT or an enterprise related to CDOT. And so RTD is at the table saying, let us build at least on part of that land additional track to relieve this very headache. Rob, last question.
Yeah, I suspect this is probably one of the few times I'll be able to talk to a scheduler like yourself. And there's a number of us on the call that are involved in safe streets advocacy. And downtown, as you know, is collectors and arterials, and it's not a great place to try to get across sometimes. When we talk to traffic engineers and we ask about timings, like for example, Blake and 20th, increasing the walk across there, they'll often tell us, well, we have to worry about the light rail and they have to get their cars through and we'd have to retime the entire system. But if they add time consistently across the system, does that cause you issue? Or is it just a matter of subtraction? Ultimately, I'm kind of wondering, are they using you as an excuse or is it a legitimate concern?
They're using me as an excuse. Actually, they're working on retiming all of the lights downtown, especially in that area due to the mall rebuilding that they're doing. So I was going to propose for the August service change to improve the running times. So to improve the reliability and the fact that the train actually show up when it's scheduled to for the H line through the central corridor. But because Denver is going to be changing their signal timing this summer sometime, I'm actually postponing that service change for probably fall. And I'm sorry, I didn't know this was already my last question. So I'll throw my information in the chat. You guys can send me all the questions. And if it's not rail related and you got bus questions, I'll send it on to my colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have a friend in the light rail scheduling business. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to end our night with a presentation from Piep van Heuven with Bicycle Colorado. And this is the day after the legislative session ends. And we're going to get the updates on what Bicycle Colorado has been pushing for, wins, deferred wins, there's no losses, deferred wins, and other interesting things that she saw under the Gold Dome. Piep,
Sure.
take it away.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it so much. I'm gonna take a stab here at sharing the screen in a minute. I know a number of the names already. I've been at INC before, but I think some of you are new to me. So just again, I'm Piep Van Heuven. I'm the Government Relations Director at Bicycle Colorado. We're the statewide bicycle advocacy organization. When the legislative session is underway between January and May, you'll find us at the Capitol speaking up either for or against bills that improve or degrade road safety, anything that's going to make bike access or safety improved, and sometimes other mobility issues, because we're interested in improving our transportation system overall. So what I'm going to roll you through is what Bicycle Colorado focused on this year. And let's roll with the share screen here. There we go. Share. Let me know if you see me. How's that look, Joel?
Looks perfect.
Okay, great. My colleague is Jack Todd, and he is doing this presentation with a different group today. So we put both of our names on this. All right, I'm going to start by going too fast. I'm going to start by talking about the two bills that we worked on the most, and then stop for questions, and then I'm going to continue the presentation. So the name of the game for the session for us this year was that we led on two big bills that we've been working on for a while, and we were fortunate that they both passed pretty early. So that was great. And then throughout the session, we engaged on another 6 bills, 5 of which have passed. And we tracked another 4 that we just wanted to see what was going on there. We were ready to engage if we needed to. This is probably 3 times as much action as I'm used to in a legislative session. So it was pretty wild and woolly, and actually a whole lot of fun. And the rush to the finish occurred because the Republicans in the House used a pretty successful filibuster for about 18 hours, where all bills over 40 pages long had to be read aloud. And it stacked up the schedule. In fact, I'm astonished that they were able to conclude their business, because they had 150 bills outstanding on Monday, and they just finished up yesterday before midnight. So that was our experience this year. So just as a reminder, this is sort of the process that you have to go through to actually pass a bill. First, you have to get a legislative sponsor, a senator or a representative. Ideally, you have both Republican and Democrat sponsors, so you can show that it's a bipartisan bill in both your chambers. And you have to go through this process twice. You have to pass your bill in the House and then flip over to the Senate, or vice versa. So the first step really is your bill that the sponsor brings forward is assigned to a committee. And for us, usually that's the House Transportation Committee or the Senate Transportation Committee. And then if there's any financial implications, it can go to as many as 2 more committees. So Appropriations or the Finance Committee, if your bill is going to either cost the state money or actually make the state money. So once it's through all the committees that it needs to go through, then it will finally go to a floor vote in either chamber. And if you have passed there, that's wonderful. And now you get to start all over again in the other chamber. What happens then is that in the second chamber, if there are any amendments or changes to the bill that are successfully passed, at the end of that process, the bill has to go back to the original chamber for them to concur and agree to the amendment that was made. So that's an additional step. And then finally, if you've made it through all of that, it'll go to the governor's office, and his choice is to veto the bill, to sign the bill, or to not sign the bill, in which case it becomes a law after, I think, a 10-day period for most bills. So also as a reminder, in order to pass your floor vote, you have to get 18 votes in the Senate or 33 votes in the House. I think I have that math right, but I was moving kind of fast yesterday. So that's our process, and I call it the big Tetris game. So the 2 bills I'm going to talk about briefly are the Colorado Safety Stop Bill and then the Power Line Trails Bill. And these are ones that we really led on. The Colorado Safety Stop, some of you are very familiar with, some of you may not be, but this is a bill that allows bicycles and other low-speed conveyances to treat a stop sign like a yield sign, and to proceed through a red light after stopping if there's no oncoming traffic and they have the right of way. We have been working on this bill in varying stages for about 5 years. And it did pass. So what it does is create statewide uniform conditions and a legal safe option for people biking and people on low-speed conveyances to clear out of the intersection if it's safe for them to do so before traffic arrives. It is a safety bill. Here's its path to victory real quick. We had 2 Democratic representatives who were sponsors and bipartisan sponsorship in the Senate with Faith Winter and Kevin Priola. It actually had some really strong vote tallies in committee and also on the floor votes. We did add 4 amendments to help various constituencies feel more comfortable with the bill. One was dropping the speed that you could yield at a stop sign to, you had to be going 10 miles an hour or less. One was to exempt youth unless they're accompanied by an adult from performing safety stops. And one was specific language that makes it clear that you must still obey a bike-specific traffic signal or any bike-specific stop signs. So it is possible for municipality to put up a specific sign at an intersection to say you cannot perform a safety stop if they feel strongly enough about it. We were fortunate to have some really great early support from the Denver Regional Council of Governments, which is a pretty powerful group because it's representative of sort of all of the entities surrounding Metro Denver. We did actually finally secure support from the Colorado Department of Transportation. They had a lot of concerns early on that we helped mitigate with some of these amendments. So the second bill that we were really leading on was called the Power Line Trails Bill. And this bill essentially required utility companies or power companies to do 2 things that they already can do. But I'll call it a trigger bill. It requires them to do it at a key time to get utility companies talking to municipalities at the right time to consider building multi-use trails under power lines. So it requires utility companies to notify local government just at the time of permitting at that time that they have the potential to build a multi-use recreational trail under the transmission lines. So they're talking at the right time. And it also requires the utility company to provide a resource document to municipalities that gives them some examples of power lines across the state and design best practices and basically what would be required of the municipality if they wanted to go ahead with it. So it creates conditions for just a regular review of the opportunity to meet energy needs and recreation needs at the same time. So its passage here, I'll go a little more quickly. We had, again, bipartisan sponsorship, some good vote tallies. We added amendments and language to this bill that basically addressed everybody's concerns right down to the one concern that I remember best, which was that a bicyclist might run into a free range cow. And our partners on this were SWEEP, the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. So we worked with them and Representative Basenecker most closely on this bill. And we had a lot of support from different environmental organizations. So I'm going to sort of just stop here for a minute and see if we have any questions on those 2 top items.
Great. I'll look for questions in the chat. I haven't seen any yet, so I'll just throw in a couple. What is a low speed conveyance? What all fits in that category?
Yeah, great question. Low speed conveyance, if you actually look in the bill, it will send you to different places in Colorado statute that define a scooter, a bike, an e-bike. And this also encompasses things like one wheels and skateboards. It's essentially anything that is not a car, that is essentially human powered and of a smaller scale. And we wrote that definition in on purpose because we believe that all small mobility devices such as bicycles really our future is tied together, and cities need to begin to adapt to the fact that they're going to have more of these lightweight devices that exist now and will exist tomorrow, and figure out how to make sure that people are safe using them and using the city transportation system.
So you didn't over specify them because we don't know exactly how they'll change in the future, but this says you'll know it when you see it. It's like this.
Yeah, what it isn't is an electric moped, for example, and it isn't a Segway, I believe.
Okay, so some of those totally powered devices, there's no human power involved. So skateboards are in.
Skateboards are in.
Fantastic.
I see a hand from Loretta.
Okay, yeah, I was looking for comments. Loretta, go ahead.
Hi, I don't have an actual picture, but I was hoping I had a picture that would work appropriately for this, but I don't. Close enough. My question for you is this going to be an easement, or is this going to be on an existing easement under the power line, or how is that going to work?
Great question. I believe that the answer is that the easement already exists. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't, for instance, create a condition where any private landowners' rights would be violated. So the easement has to exist already for the power line trail, and then you can build the multi-use path underneath it, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the easement would already exist. That's why I wondered if it's just going to go and be a parallel easement for it.
I'm not the technical expert on this one because our partner Sweep was fortunately fabulous at that. And we're fabulous at bringing the marketing and the recreational impact argument as well. You know, again, what I think is so unique about the Power Line Trails bill is that you can already do this. The utility company and a municipality can already agree to build a multi-use trail. And there's a couple examples around the state already, like the East-West Trail, which is down in South Denver, is just spectacular. This just makes them talk at the right time for the municipality to go, oh, okay, there's a great opportunity for sort of double community benefit here. And so we think just putting that conversation in at that right time is actually going to increase the number of trails that result.
Thanks. I didn't know if there was any kind of plans for like rails to trails either.
Well, I'm very interested in those too, but I'm going to take a different tact on those next year.
Oh, we're getting a preview of next year.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Some comments in the chat that are just congratulations. No comment, just congratulations. Some funny comments about being terrorized by geese while on bikes. And then one more on the safety stop. One of the amendments that came was, these are the rules for safety stop. And unlike previously, a win that Bicycle Colorado had was allowing any municipality to do safety stop. Now safety stop is allowed everywhere in the entire state, and got that done. But an amendment says they can put up signage at specific intersections when it's not appropriate to do a safety stop. You have to stop fully and obey car rules. And I'm imagining that is for, you know, like a place where visibility is really poor. There's a hill and you can't tell a car is coming, and a car might have the green, and you could be in the intersection. You didn't see the car coming, the car was coming. So, you know, places where the specifics of the situation make the visibility a curve or something. Is that what they had in mind?
Sort of. So it's sort of two pieces. One piece says that you must obey an existing bike traffic signal. Those are the ones where the red bike shows up or the green bike shows up. And the reason for that is that those things only exist when they are tightly choreographing what goes when, and there's a lot of turning movements, and you don't want to go if you have a red bike signal. You want to wait and go on the green. So we still have to obey those as they go red and green. The piece about the traffic signage actually came about because one of the senators on the 5-person Senate Transportation Committee was just particularly concerned about rotaries and really believed that at the rotary in their district, it would be best if there was some kind of a sign that said you have to stop before you enter the rotary. So we had to get that vote, but CDOT also had sort of the same concern, and they cited a couple of different really large intersections where they said, we just don't feel that these types are safe. So we made that agreement sort of knowing that they don't have the money to sign all the intersections that they have jurisdiction over that are unsafe. It might be that there are some where they need to put up a sign, which they still have to design and have an appropriate pilot program for. The sign doesn't exist yet. And, you know, if that comes to pass, there'll be a handful of these. It'll give advocates the opportunity to turn around, point to the sign and say, let's talk about the fact that you know that this intersection is unsafe. And we know this because you actually felt the need to place a special sign here. So, you know, what we have now is just a blanket understanding that statewide Colorado safety stop is the law and is applicable for bicyclists, except for in some very specific situations.
Great, great. Okay, well, please continue.
Thanks. So this is a preview of coming attractions. I have a couple slides on these, some of the other bills that we engaged in and the results. And so I'm just going to sort of roll through these real quickly. This is a picture of Jared Polis on a bike. He's better standing next to it than he is riding it. I can say that. He did actually ride that bike inside the Capitol. That was interesting. So the pawnbroker bill, I'll touch on this really briefly. This was a really specific niche bill that we brought specifically to help out a business called the Pros Closet, which is the world's largest reseller of used quality certified bicycles, and it's located in Louisville, Colorado. They had a really specific business problem, which was that their law enforcement there was treating them as though they were a pawnbroker, and pawnbrokers are required to hold their inventory for 30 days, and that was causing them a business headache. So this bill created a distinction in the law between pawnbrokers and resellers such that they could be classified as a reseller and do business. And it passed pretty handily. So I'll go to the next one. This is a very happy CEO of the Pros Closet. Senate Bill 193 was called the Air Quality Bill. This to me is the third most exciting bill that we worked on. It created 2 clean air grant programs that the Colorado Energy Office will manage, and $12 million are going to go into a low-income Coloradan rebate program if people want to buy an e-bike. So it is significant because it's the first big state investment in e-bikes. It is a low-income transportation solution. And right now we're nation leading because it's the most amount of money any state's committed to e-bikes over, I think, California and Colorado. We're also excited about this because we've been involved in helping grow the energy and enthusiasm around e-bike programs, starting with a mini pilot with the Colorado Energy Office, leading to a couple of pilots they rolled out in different places across the state you may have read about last year. And that included sort of the CASR, the Denver's Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency Program, and their own little Denver e-bike rebate program. So we've seen an enormous interest in and now a state investment in e-bikes. And we are excited about that. So here's Jack Todd, my colleague on the right, looking excited with Mackenzie Hart, who should also be excited because he's one of the 12 bike shop owners in Denver that are starting to get a lot of business with Denver's program. Senate Bill 179 was called, uninspiringly, Deter Tampering Emission System. And I call this the coal rolling bill. So I also really love this bill. Coal rolling, in fact, was made illegal with a bill we worked on a couple of years ago. But what we learned was that it's very hard to catch people in the act when they blow diesel at you. You have to have some kind of video evidence and then prove that the driver was actually driving the vehicle. And so it was continuing. This bill goes really significantly upstream and essentially makes the act of changing the emission system so that it can roll coal illegal in every way imaginable. It means you can't, you're not allowed to work on a car and change its emission system. You can't sell a car that has a tampered system. You're not allowed to operate a vehicle that has a tampered system. And there's a 1-year grace period for people to self-report and apply for a grant program to untamper your system. I don't know how to describe it. So vehicles that can roll coal are about to be illegal in Colorado. And that's good for bicyclists because this is what it looks like when somebody blasts diesel at you. Senate Bill 180 is called Reduce Ozone Through Transit. So this is primarily a transit bill with some other wonderful additions. And we are excited about the transit investment because it's going to get more people out of cars and onto buses, which makes the roadways a lot more pleasant. So it's going to invest a significant amount of money in RTD and other transit operators so that they can provide free transit days during the bad ozone season, mostly in August. It also includes $40 million that will go to CDOT. 30 million of that will increase Bustang operations, offer new Bustang operations, and 10 million of that will be invested in the Revitalizing Main Streets program. So we are liking the transit investment. We're almost done here. So this is a little complicated, and I'm just going to give you the simple version. There were two bills that were substantially the same. I'm going to call one the carrot and the other one the carrot and the stick. The carrot and the stick was House Bill 1138, and it failed. The one with just the carrot passed. The difference between the two is that the one that passed rewards employers who are offering alternative transportation options to their employees, like transit passes or bike share memberships. They get a 50% tax credit on the programs that they offer. If the other version of the bill had passed, it would have included more restrictions and more reporting. And the business community really pushed back hard on this, and that's why it did not go through. The chief requirement that they didn't like would have been that employers that had over 100 employees would have been required to offer alternative transportation options. And that was apparently a deal breaker for large employers. So I'm almost done. We watched 4 other bills and didn't really engage on them. And I'll just touch on them briefly. This first one died in a first committee, but if it had continued, we would have jumped in it. It was a bill that would have required a municipality that wanted to use any kind of automated vehicle ID systems in HOV lanes to go to a ballot. And we're not excited about that. We want more camera use, not less of it. The second bill, devices to assess motorist impairment. This is money that's going to be allocated to CDOT, and CDOT will be required to do a study and determine if there are devices out there that can see if motorists are driving high. So if they're impaired for any reason other than alcohol. So that study is going to happen, and CDOT is going to have to report back on what their options are within a year. This third one, the Senate Bill 215, is $81 million that municipalities can access to use for match dollars for competitive federal grants for a variety of different things. But 30% of that $81 million has to be spent in transportation. So it offers a lot of match dollars for transportation projects. And then finally, Senate Bill 179, that's the distracted driving bill. And it was actually gaining steam and looked to me like it would pass, but it did not pass because it did not get through the Senate Appropriations Committee in time. The chair, I think, failed to schedule it on Monday. So distracted driving did not pass this year. So this is my last slide, and I'll get off of share here, but my email is Piep, P-I-E-P, @bicyclecolorado.org. And this is the time of year when we start, catching up on our sleep and then thinking about what we want to get going on next year. So if you have ideas for what you'd like to see in the legislative session related to biking or transportation, please feel free to shoot me or Jack an email. I'm going to jump back into the main screen here and see what questions we have.
Great. Greg has a policy question about sidewalks and Bicycle Colorado's focus. Greg?
So this was just more of a comment. It seems that every time I am out walking, I'm not a bicyclist. There are bicyclists on sidewalks, which present a safety hazard to me. So I think there should be greater education about where bicyclists should be riding.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's important. It's important for the scooter community as well, which I find on the sidewalk all the time as a pedestrian. And we have a joint interest, I think, as pedestrians and bicyclists and scooter riders and what have you, to create that safe space on the roadway. So the bicyclists and scooters feel comfortable in the roadway, are welcomed in the roadway, such that they don't feel that they have to use the sidewalk as their default. So there's a combination of solutions there that have to happen. And yeah, Bruce, I can answer that question as well when we get to it.
Yeah, please. Maybe just one thing about the sidewalks. I understand that some municipalities require their scooter share operators to, by some kind of geofencing, highly specific means, make them go slow on sidewalks so they can tell the difference between the road and the sidewalk, even though they're next to each other. Are you familiar with that? Is that a good idea?
It's a great idea, and I've seen a scooter system that can do it. You know, as the technology improves, they're going to be able to identify actually where the scooter is in the system, and they do it right now on the 16th Street Mall. If you try and ride a scooter on the 16th Street Mall, it'll suddenly start just like putting along, basically stop going effectively. And they should be able to do that when they can determine if a scooter is on a sidewalk in a municipality where scooter riding on the sidewalk is not allowed, and that includes Denver. So what you'd like to do there is talk to your council person or lean on the Department of Transportation to be sure that in the contracts that they write with the scooter companies, that they're required to follow up and improve their technology to sort of enforce the riding behavior that we want to see.
Great. Yeah. Let's see. We've got. I like people to be able to ask questions in their own voice if they can. Bruce has one about one of the items that didn't pass. Bruce.
Yeah, Piep, can you just comment on my question? You've already seen it, I can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was an article in Colorado Politics, and I think also reprinted in the Gazette. Essentially, what I alluded to with the distracted driving bill, it would have rolled through the Appropriations Committee, my opinion, and ended up being voted on the House floor and probably passed. But the committee chair, Leslie Harrods, failed to schedule it in time for it to pass. So she quoted a piece of a statement from Bicycle Colorado about our position on the bill as an example of why the community may not have wanted to see it go forward. And the statement itself, it's factual. So Bicycle Colorado's position on distracted driving essentially is that we believe it to be a huge public health epidemic, but we've also stepped away since 2020 from relying on any new policy that relies solely on police enforcement because of the danger of over-policing. And we do know that there is a danger of that. We would have supported the distracted driving bill if it had been presented as a secondary offense like seatbelts. So this year we were in a monitor position on it. We didn't engage on distracted driving. And so I would say that that article really accurately portrays the fact that the bill sponsor, Senator Hansen, and the Appropriations Committee Chair, Leslie Harrod, did not see eye to eye. And Leslie Harrod found a statement that we made and used it in the article to argue with him.
Well, Chris Hansen is my state senator, and I asked him about that. And I've been working, I go back to working with Lois Court. I'm trying to get something done along those lines.
Mm-hmm. We were supporting the distracted driving bill that originally was brought by Lois Court for about 3 years before 2020. And we made a policy shift then. And our position really is that direct reliance on police enforcement is too narrow of an effort, that there is a risk of pretextual stops that could impact Black and Brown communities. So we haven't changed that position in the past 2 years. And I've had conversations with Senator Hansen as recently as actually 10 days ago, and then previously in December as well. So none of that is really a surprise to him.
Okay, well, he's going to bring that back next year. Will you work with him to get something passed that helps the public and gets through the legislature?
We will work on distracted driving options. And so what I would like to see would be technology options like increased automated enforcement, like network level distracted driving, and maybe paired with secondary offense distracted driving. So I can't commit to supporting a bill exactly as it looks like this year. But again, this year, we didn't engage on distracted driving. We simply monitored the bill. There were a lot of other supporters who were looking to move that bill through session. And we weren't a factor. I understand what you're saying, Bruce, and distracted driving scares the bejesus out of me too. My nervous factor is that people see this as the silver bullet, that once we tell the police it's your responsibility and now you take care of it, it's actually one, there is a danger to Black and Brown communities, and two, it's actually not doing enough. So that's the nuanced position that we've taken in the past 2 years. I'm happy to talk to you about it more after the call.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You bet.
And let's end, John thinks he has microphone access back and he has two questions. One's about coal rolling and one is about automated enforcement. John?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, sounds great.
Excellent. I've got two questions and a comment. My first question about coal rolling, how will that be enforced? Will vehicles be tested during annual emissions or something like that? My second question, can a law be written to make photo enforcement real? I know right now that they have to be delivered by a cop or else people can just ignore them. And there's got to be a way to make that not a problem anymore. And then my comment is regarding scooters on the 16th Street Mall. I've been on a scooter crossing 16th Street Mall in traffic on the street where I'm supposed to be. And the scooter cut out and I'm in traffic. There's cars behind me and I can't get the darn thing to move. And it's not cool. So two questions and that comment.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that comment. It's happened to me too. So the scooter companies need to continue to work on their technology. The coal rolling question, how will it be enforced? I would actually have to go back and look at the bill. But essentially, if you're a motor vehicle repair shop and you get caught retrofitting this vehicle, the fine is really high. You're not going to want to work on it. I don't know that there is a specific system of going and checking everybody's cars or whether it's when they run through the emissions testing. I would have to actually go and look at that. But what's going to be the real stick of that bill is that if somebody turns you in for having a car that can roll coal and you're driving it, or if you're caught working on a car, et cetera, there's a very substantial fine. People are not going to want to get that fine. So that's the chief driver, I think. And then I didn't quite get your question was what about photo enforcement? Could you say that again?
Sure. With photo enforcement, I know it's a problem actually getting those tickets enforced because the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that it doesn't count if a cop didn't see it or a cop didn't deliver it or something like that. And so I figure there's got to be a way to rewrite the law so that you actually can have photo enforcement and people do have to pay the fines even without the cop being involved.
Yeah, so we've already sort of started work on automated enforcement. And I think this is the area where we really do want to lean in on bad driving behaviors. And I don't remember a court issue. The issue is the state law. The state law right now requires both that there be a human being there sort of present in that photo enforcement van. As well, it only allows automated enforcement in sort of 4 specific instances. So it's like, I'm not going to get them all, but it's school districts and parks and it's totally out of my head right now. There are 4 different specific arenas where you can use automated enforcement and arterials aren't one of them, which is actually where all the dying is happening. So I would like to, at the very least, be able to remove those handcuffs from state law so that the cities like Denver and Boulder that really want to use more automated enforcement can start to do so. There's still equity considerations with automated enforcement. It is also not a perfect tool. And a lot of that depends on where the cameras are placed. So we definitely have some work to do there as well. But I do think technology is going to be part of the answer to the bad driving behavior that we're seeing on the roadways.
Well, thank you very much, Piep. This was just excellent and so timely. I remember back years ago at the Zoning and Planning Committee, Michael Henry would say, maybe we need a lobbying arm to INC, and we don't have a lobbying arm to INC. We have something better. We have coalition of different advocacy groups working on transportation and mobility issues, and together we're very strong. Thank you for all your work.
You bet.
I'd like to just have 2 announcements. This is sent out from the email. Denver Moves Everyone. So this is the city transportation master plan, and fundamentally it's about money. It's about resource allocation because we already have a bike plan and a ped plan and transit plan. But how do we decide what to fund in what order? Denver Moves Everyone is the project that's going to answer that. There's a public meeting online next Tuesday, the 17th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. You can find that at denvermoveseveryone.com. And then Denver Streets Partnership and Bicycle Colorado Vision Zero Coalition and others. Denver Bike Lobby are sponsoring the Vision Zero Ride and Walk of Silence. That's next week on Wednesday. Details to sign up you can find on Denver Streets Partnership website, and we're also in the email. That's a very moving and important event, not only for those who participate, but for the whole city to be reminded of what's too often not front and center, and that's way too many people are dying or becoming seriously injured on our streets. So just 2 opportunities to engage. Thank you very much for attending. We'll have this recording up so you can share it with others. And with your votes tonight, we're going to take to the INC delegation a month from now, because their meeting is just this Saturday and that's not enough notice time, the motion that INC officially endorsed the Denver Deserves Sidewalks ballot initiative. Thank you all very much. Have a fantastic evening.